Hello, Morland, and welcome to Speaking of Everything. With me, I have a very interesting gentleman. At least you see him once a year right here on Speaking of Everything or Oral Gives Live, and it's good to have him here. He's the founder, president, CEO of Henderson International. Is that a good introduction?
It sounds powerful, Oral. Yes, but accurate. Yes.
Right. So how you doing here?
I'm good. It's always nice to be here with you and to be in a position to share information with your viewers.
So the name Neil Henderson has become synonymous with insurance.
Is that so? Well, I'm not sure about that, but yes, if you look at the insurance history and the landscape that we have today, you might find that my name pops up pretty often indeed.
I think you're the only insurance person that have their own name in the company, right?
Yes, which is a huge risk, but when you are confident that you are doing the right things for the people that you serve and the community on a whole, then it's a risk that you're willing to take.
So the industry has gone through a lot of changes over the last, 10, 15, 20 years. Is it better now or more difficult now? How is it in the industry?
Well, nowadays you don't even have to guess how things are. Most things are becoming more challenging today compared to 20 years ago. As a matter of fact, you have some countries that cannot even provide affordable eggs for the citizens, much less a commodity as insurance. Because of climate change and wars and the threats of wars, you're having more challenges finding affordable insurance. So there's a requirement of a lot more creativity within the industry, and those who really focus on what is the best outcomes of any process for clients, those are the entities that are really making a difference, because not much is geared right now towards making things easy or more affordable for clients.
So when you started, 20 years ago or that?
It's over 20.
Yeah. Do you think if you had to start now, it will be the same? Better when you started?
It would have been more difficult.
No?
Yes. Because 20 years ago, it was a relationship business. You met people, you got to know people, you let them know what you were doing. They gave you an opportunity to represent their insurance needs. And you could have really met with them one-on-one and explained things to them. So like that, you were getting customers joining your organization in a very informed manner, but also they felt like family. Today it's different because you are competing with the global market where everybody can offer insurance on the World Wide Web. And
other than not insured, other than not covered by the central bank surrounding Curacao?
Correct.
Yeah?
Yes, you have freedom to choose as a client, so you can buy insurance anywhere. The entities that are supervised by the central bank are those with a physical location either in Curacao or St. Martin. But besides that, due to all the requirements and so forth and the regulatory procedures before you can get a customer, you're not really making a difference in terms of the way you represent clients. So if a client comes by company A, B, or C, the first encounter, everything looks the same. So you have to provide certain information to them before they can even start with advice or before they get to selling you the product. And that's a key difference compared to the past, because customers got to know you in the process, what you believe in, your preference. You got to take a good inventory of their personal situation, and you got the opportunity to go out as a broker. I'm speaking of brokers now, and really try to find a good fit for their insurance needs.
So, do you think because of all the compliance issues made it more difficult?
Yes, because it's difficult to separate yourself from the rest.
Okay.
Because the same requirements
For
count
everyone.
for everyone. So, and then, yeah, before you really get to starting to build a relationship with the client, it takes much longer now than in the past.
But Henderson International is covering more things than just insurance, right? You're also in the financial sector, right?
Yes, we advise people, and mind you, when it comes to pension plans, that's a very specific product that has to do with finances. It has to do with a bunch of fiscal matters. Sometimes people get a payout from the company that they were working, and then we would also advise on what the best way to go about investing that money, and making arrangements with the tax office also to see what type of benefits you can get for the client. So our scope of services is much broader than just an insurance product.
You know, a lot of banks in the region always say that the Caribbean is a very high-risk area compared to like Africa and so forth. When it comes to the insurance companies, is that the same?
In terms of risk?
In terms of risk and reliability, in terms of also customers having to meet their obligation paying their premiums also.
Well, the Caribbean, besides us being in the hurricane belt, most of the islands, you also have to look at the economy and the spending capacity of clients. If a bread costs $1 in one country and it costs 10 cents in the other country, then of course the country that pays 10 cents for the bread will have more money to buy insurance. So it also has to do with the economy of the country. And when we look at the way we are impacted by climate change with all the hurricanes and earthquakes and so forth in the Caribbean, and not having the numbers in terms of taxpayers to rebuild and to pay back loans and so forth, I would say the Caribbean now is in a weaker position than it was 20 years ago.
So it makes it more difficult for the average person to insure their property.
Correct, because of inflation primarily. Yes.
What I noticed too, over the years, the cost for construction. The other day I went to buy some material just for plumbing. And I was shocked. I said, wow, imagine if you have to build a house now. The plumbing material alone, what it will cost you.
Yes, and I'm glad that you mentioned that, Oral, because that is something I would really want the public of St. Martin to pay keen attention to. When you need someone to come and do a simple repair on your home, it is 99% likely that you get shocked, like, wow, is it really so much? So much less if you have to rebuild a home when it's destroyed by a fire or a hurricane or even an earthquake, which is a real threat nowadays. Yeah. So I would encourage people to really find a way of insuring your homes, especially in these times, because the possibility of rebuilding it without losing some ribs is very unlikely.
But 1995 thought a lot a lesson. At a time, a lot of people weren't insured also. You see the attitude change from 95 to now. We had another big one in 2017, Irma.
Correct.
And so all these different hurricanes have devastated us. But I understand that a lot of people still have problems insuring their property.
Yes, well, Hurricane Lewis was a tremendous teacher for those who found out that it is better paying a premium and being in a position to stand in a line to collect a settlement to rebuild. But you know, as time passes, some people forget, or maybe some people pass on. Now their children have inherited those homes. The children don't have the experience of Hurricane Lewis and so forth. Priorities are shifting. Not everyone feels that spending money to buy insurance is something that is of great priority.
Really?
Certainly when you compare it to sending your kids to college or, you know, paying for cost of living as we know it today. You're spending much more money for basic things now than 20 years ago. Even when you go to the supermarket, you notice it. So people juggle a lot with where do I spend my money? And because insurance is something that, you know, it's very promissory in nature, you know. The insurance company pays if and when something happens. So, and that is why we believe so much in giving information, reminding people that, look, it is always a real threat for you to get in a state of discomfort if something happens and you're not covered. And can you deal with that level of discomfort and not having the finances to rebuild?
Another thing is, so if someone's going to insure their home, January is better than June or April. Is there a particular time of the year that's best to start at the insurance? Maybe there might be an odd kind of question, but I've heard some people saying January as opposed to June. That's why.
Well, that has to do with a number of things. Your budget, if you know that you have more money in January, then you budget for January. If you are looking, for example, at, okay, I'm getting extra money in July, maybe a bonus or vacation allowance and so forth, you would do it based on a budgetary basis. But you also have some people that decide, well, you know, I am going to wait till I realize that we are in the season when there's a real hurricane threat before paying my premiums.
That's a problem, though, sometimes.
Very often, if there is an alert out that hurricanes are coming, then you wouldn't be able to insure at that moment. In addition to that, you can also have a situation where at the reinsurance conference, that's where insurance companies go to see what the cost of reinsurance will be and how they can reduce it and so forth. That is a moment that the reinsurance market will probably up the premium or lower it.
And when that happens?
That happens mostly between April and July.
April and July, okay, all right.
Yes.
And so sometimes you can beat the increase by just being ahead of that. In other words, that's what I was trying to get at when I asked that question with the January and June.
But it's not really calculable because you never know how the weather or how climate change would impact your territory in any given year. And remember, it's not just about your territory, it's about reinsurers that accept risk all over the world.
So they cover every part of the world.
Reinsurers, usually, they are supporting insurance companies all over the world. So wherever there are claims, for example, in Los Angeles, for example, or anything that has to do with the pandemic or any crash of an airline, for example, you have reinsurers that have to pitch in and pay those bills. So when they are going to sell capacity to the insurance companies afterwards, they will want to recoup those losses.
So when there's a damage, say in St. Martin, and you file a claim with your insurance company will then file a claim with the reinsurers.
Correct. Correct. Not in every instance, but once it passes a certain level, then they go knocking on the doors of reinsurers.
And then it becomes pretty interesting. I say that because, in 1995, I think insurance companies were more flexible, and we saw quite a change when Irma came along. Maybe because it was so devastating. A lot of people saw a difference in terms of how claims were handled, etc.
And in those days, you had much more reinsurers in the world.
Oh, okay. In 95, there were more reinsurance.
You had much more reinsurers or people that were and entities that invested in risk.
Oh.
But as time went by, climate change and everything that is happening in the world that poses great levels of uncertainty,
yeah.
You have less reinsurers today than 20 years ago. So that drove the price up. And also the frequency in which claims are being made at reinsurers contributed to them raising the prices.
All right. In case you've just joined us, I'm Earl Gibbs here, and speaking of everything with Mr. Neil Henderson. He's the founder, president, CEO of Henderson International, and we're here speaking with him. When we come back, we will continue right here on Speaking of Everything on Hot 99.9 FM Radio, Facebook, and YouTube.
We are vibrant, expressive, warm, and diverse. Together, we conquer, and now we expand into new horizons, giving you more of the best. Introducing our new Banco Matico Plus with wider acceptance, purchase protection, and enhanced security. Whether you're online, traveling, or in paradise, experience more with Windward Island Bank. Banco Matico Plus. More of the best.
My guest here on Speaking of Everything is Mr. Neil Henderson, and we're here speaking with him about the insurance industry and our area where we are bombarded with hurricanes in the last 20-25 years. But it's quite interesting because I remember we had an insurance company years ago, just before 1995, called Castaway. And I spoke with you about that already one time. Yeah. The name alone should have said something. Yes. And so a lot of people were left without any coverage.
Yes, yes. That is true. That was one of the negative experiences in insurance.
But people don't have to worry now about coverage. They're pretty safe, right?
The industry is well regulated now. And the chances of that happening, there's too much red flags that would go up before getting to that stage now. And of course you have the supervisory entity, the central bank, that is supposed to look into those things. Castaway was an insurance broker back in the days. And brokers did not fall under supervision of the central bank at the time.
Oh, but they do now?
No, yes, since 2004.
Okay. Is that because of Castaway in a way too?
Well, there was a lot of things that had to be regulated to make sure that the interests of clients are secured.
Oh, okay.
And that was the main driving force to also regulate brokers.
Let me ask you, when the person insures their property, do you advise them to take pictures of every room, all the items they have in the house? Is that necessary or not?
No, it's not that complicated. When you're going to insure, you need to know your reconstruction value.
So like an appraisal report?
Yes, and that can be done with an appraisal report, but you can also do it based on a good estimation from, let's say, a contractor.
Oh, okay. Never accept that?
Yes.
Yeah.
If you have a property that is 100 square meters, a good contractor would be able to tell you, well, Oral, for that type of property, based on the material, whether the floor is marble or normal ceramic tiles and so forth, if the kitchen is hardwood or just plywood and so forth, they'll be able to tell you that to rebuild such a home would cost $1,000 per square meter. So then that's a simple math. You do 100 square meters times 1,000, that's $100,000.
The reason why I ask that is because I know of a local person who does appraisal reports, and some banks would not accept his appraisal reports from his company. That's why I asked that question. So if some banks are not accepting appraisal reports from an appraiser, I wonder how the insurance companies will deal with that, if they had any preference over, say, a contractor as opposed to an appraiser. That's why I asked that question.
Well, you're seeing a lot of these things happening.
Yeah.
The more interests are at play, the more you're going to have entities trying to organize and regulate things in a manner that suits their risk profile or the securities that they want in place. But I don't think if someone is a certified appraiser, it is up to a bank to tell them that we're not going to accept your appraisal. So maybe appraisers should get together and form some kind of organization to avoid those levels of discrimination.
But at least contractors can also do it, and that's acceptable.
Yes, insurance companies would accept the value that you give to them, because only when there's a claim, they would really look at what is my liability towards you, how much do I have to pay you. So if you came in with 1,000 per square meter, and at the end of the day it turns out that to rebuild was actually 1,005, then you would be underinsured. Or you have the possibility also of you insuring at 1,000, but it turns out that it was 900, so then you overinsured. But
every way you look at it, you lose.
And that is why, to avoid that particular misunderstanding, it's better to get it from a certified appraiser.
So they don't have any play areas, say like plus or minus 3-5%. You're safe.
Yes, some insurance companies have that. They go up to 15-20%. Yes.
Yeah.
But you need the services of a broker to advise you which companies would give that extra benefit.
And you can do that.
Absolutely, because we represent like 12 different insurance companies. So any client that comes to Henderson International, we would be able to highlight at least 10 key differences between the different insurance companies, whether good or bad. And then you as a client will be so informed that you can say, well, you know what, I'll take my pension plan from this company, because even though that company A, offers 3.5% guaranteed interest, the company that offers 3% also gives profit sharing.
Oh, okay.
And the other company, if I die, the money goes to the insurance company if I don't have spouse or children, while the other company would give the money to my surviving aunt or uncle or something like that. And so you can have in one specific policy that is being offered by different insurance companies key benefits that a client should know before purchasing.
I got to ask you, does clients know these things that you just mentioned?
Well, sometimes clients know.
They'll be not so sophisticated here in the island when it comes to, for example, pensions, etc. Government workers, they're covered. The hospitality area is not covered. And it creates a burden for government down the road. Later on, when these people turn 65, and they don't have that coverage because I don't know if hotels have pensions now, but when I work in the industry, there were no pensions.
Yeah, but pension is becoming a very popular thing now because a lot of people are realizing that, look, if I have to rely on the government AOV, which is about 1,000 guilders now, providing that you have been a resident 47 years in St. Martin, that might not be sufficient for me when I go on pension. So you're having now more employees willing to partake in a pension plan. And
outside of the company that they're working for.
Yes.
Personal, yeah.
Yes. And you have more employers now willing to offer pension plans to be able to keep their good employees.
They have those in St. Martin?
Yeah, you have some good employees.
That's good to hear.
And good and smart employers go the extra mile to offer them a pension plan so that when they retire, besides the 1,000 guilders from government, they have something additional coming in.
Because companies run from that extra cost. Because they have to share it with the employees.
Yes, but a lot of companies, it's because they don't know the huge tax benefit that governments offer.
So there's a deduction not only for the person, but for the company also.
Yes, it's 100% write-off, the premium. And the employee, if they're paying in 10 guilders, because it's coming from the gross salary, they would only end up losing maybe 4 guilders in the net salary. And the employer's portion, that goes in the profit and loss as an expense. So then you don't pay profit tax on the premiums that you paid.
You know, it's amazing. When you look back at St. Martin, we are a hospitality island. People come from all over. We're like the leaders in the northeastern Caribbean when it comes to tourism. But at the same time, you're seeing people now who are 65, 70, 75. They're suffering because on this island, we never had pensions before. And that's why I said earlier, it becomes a burden to the government because they're not covered by much money, just I think 1,100 guilders from SZV, and it makes it very difficult for those people to survive.
Yes.
So now that people are coming more sophisticated in a way, understanding the benefits of pension, it makes sense for them to have a pension, even if their company that they're working for doesn't offer a pension, right?
Correct. However, the pension, the premium that is paid must be derived from an employment agreement.
So you have to have that.
So you have to have employer-employee contribution, because if the government allows it to come from an individual only, then that individual will be getting a tax benefit and not paying other taxes to government. So it has to be a joint venture that is derived from employment.
Now, if you're a taxi driver,
yes,
you could do that on your own, right?
If you have a NV, you can do it. Or if you organize as a taxi association and you say, well, look, we are going to contribute every month 5% of our turnover, then we can sit with an organization like that and make sure that something can be structured, something can be tailor-made for that particular entity. But it has to be an entity, not an individual, because you want to make sure that the premium payer is an entity that collects the money from everybody and pays it. Otherwise, you would have too much collection issues and so forth. And because the pension plan the funds have to be invested, you earn interest and so forth.
That's tax deductible, though.
Yes. And if it's not done within the framework of the law, then it disqualifies for a pension plan.
Okay. What do you think people don't know about insuring the property in St. Martin? over the years that you've been in the business, what do you think that people continuously come up where you say, wow, I can't imagine people still don't get that? Is there any area in insurance that you think is that, and they need to know that is so important?
People need to know that a good broker is the biggest value in insurance, because one of the things we've noticed, Oral, is that people are very reluctant to buy insurance, understandably so, because it's a promise you're buying. But if you know that you have to have insurance, then seek out a good broker, sit with that broker, and find out what the options are on the market. And once you are informed, then you can make a much better decision, whether it's from a budgetary perspective, because a broker, even though the premiums are 1,000 in the market, if the broker listens to your specific circumstances, then the broker can make an argument with the insurance company why you should and could pay maybe $850. So most people don't have time to sit down and really look at their options. And that results in a rush purchase, or they would buy from an entity that has no proven track record, or someone with a good talk, and someone that makes a lot of promises, but you can't really find it in the policy wording, because a sales pitch, if it doesn't match what is written in your policy, that's a huge problem.
But the average person can't understand those policies. They're written just for lawyers and insurance people to understand it. The language is so complex.
That is correct, and that is why I say when you're buying insurance, try to choose people that have a track record. Choose entities that have been around, went through hurricanes, and still there, because you know at least that those entities had to be doing something good
to survive that.
To survive. And they will not risk their reputation by telling you, yes, if something happens, you're gonna get a car, flowers every day. People will visit you in the hospital, and so forth.
They're good at that extreme.
Because
you never know.
I'm generalizing, of course, but it's almost like politics. When it's a new party, you can promise a lot of things.
Promise the world.
So, if there's one thing I would tell people is try to look at track record. Try to verify who is really in it to make me better as a client, and not just for commission or for a sales.
So now this year, did the premiums go up or remain the same?
The premiums have stabilized since after Irma, and so if you have a property that is worth about $100,000, today you're paying something like $900, between $900 and $1,100 in premium. And again, as we started out, I say it's best to spend that money and have a benefit when your home is destroyed. You can really go stand in line, present the claim, get a settlement, rebuild, versus doing something different with that premium and having to find a way to rebuild, even in a very basic way where you just, put on a blue roof, the tarpaulin, and maybe you have a little shower on the side and you can cook a bit, but the rest of the home is destroyed. It's not worth trying to save that money to risk that type of benefit.
All right, so Mr. Henderson, I want to thank you. Wish you much success.
Thank you very much, Morel.
That's Mr. Neil Henderson, President, Founder, CEO of Henderson International. I'll see you next time right here on Speaking About Everything on YouTube, Facebook, and on 99.9 FM radio. Take care. Bye.